Good evening. My name is Dr. Rajendran. I'm the consultant urologist and urological surgeon at KPA Damansara Specialist Hospital for the past 15 years. Today my talk is on understanding and managing a growing men's health issue, which is the rise of kidney stones. A very catchy phrase. At first instance, I will think that is rise of kidney stones the same as rise of the machines in Terminator? Or is it rise of Skywalker in Star Wars? Or the rise of Planet of the Apes and rise of lichens? But no, kidney stones is not as complicated as all these Hollywood movies. Now basically it's easy to understand why kidney stones form, and I'll give you a good idea on how we manage urinary stones. Urinary stones meaning kidney stones, urethric stones and bladder stones. Now kidney stones comes in different shapes and sizes because there are different types of stones. Now you can see here some are oval in shape, oblong in shape, spheroid in shape, star shape, spiking shapes, spiculated shapes. So they come in different size and different components. Now it's very important to know these type of stones because the management of the kidney stones will differ based on the stones. Now based on the component of the stones, kidney stones may either be classified into calcium based stones and non-calcium based stones. The non-calcium based stones are uric acid stones, struvite stones and cystine stones. It gives us a clue of how stones form and how do we manage these stones. Some of the stones are very soft, but some of the stones are very hard and difficult to break with just shockwave lithotripsy. Now this diagram shows on the right side of this picture, of this image, shows a very huge stone which encompasses the whole of the internal structure of the kidney. This is known as a staghorn stone. A staghorn stone is very big. It looks like a complex stone, and treatment or management is a bit different. Now why do we have a lot of stone predisposition in this country? Unfortunately, we are in the endemic stone belt. The endemic stone belt is a belt across Asia Minor, Middle East, North India, Southeast Asia, and New Guinea. This area, we have many people forming kidney stones, most probably because of geographical, tropical countries. People sweat a lot and the diet is a bit different, more carbohydrate diet and so forth. This area, the kidney stone prevalence is very, very high as compared to the Western Hemisphere. Now, to know how to manage stones or treat stones, we need to know how do stones form in the first place. This diagram just gives a very brief example of how stones form. It may be due to dietary and lifestyle factors, not drinking enough water, or genetic predisposition or genetic disease, especially in children, and acquired metabolic defects in children. Basically what happens is there's crystal formation, aggregation of crystal, followed by growth of the kidney stone. Now the basic reason why stone forms is due to supersaturation of the urine. Without supersaturation of the urine, stones just cannot form. Now basically I'll give you an example. Let's say you have got a glass of water. You put in some salt, you can mix it. Put in some more salt, you can mix it. Some more salt, it becomes concentrated. Some more salt, it becomes saturated. You put in some more salt, it becomes supersaturated. In a supersaturated urine, there's a lot of crystals. The crystals aggregate together, nucleation occurs, crystal growth, followed by aggregation and stone formation. So the basic science behind urinary stone formation is only one. It's supersaturation of the urine. Very highly concentrated urine, full of crystals. And this may be basic cause is either inadequate fluid intake, not drinking enough water, urine becomes very concentrated, or too many crystals in the urine. You eat certain stuffs like too much of calcium, too much of uric acids and too much of oxalates, they form a lot of crystals in the urine and then they form stones. So without supersaturation of the urine, you cannot form stones. Now the causes of supersaturation of urine, most important And the most commonest cause is dietary and lifestyle factors. Dietary factors meaning not drinking enough water. Water component is the most important component to prevent stones. Food is less important, but is important in people who have got a very high calcium in the urine or high uric acid or oxalates in the urine. Then they have to change their lifestyle, change their dietary habits. Acquired metabolic defects and genetic predisposition are usually seen in children. They have certain metabolic defects which cause excessive amount of crystals and then forming stones. Now, to understand how do we manage stones, we need to understand what are the different factors that make us decide how to manage different stones. So we need to know how are urinary stones classified based on. Firstly, they're based on different shapes and sizes. Secondly, different contents of the stone. And thirdly, how we manage urinary stones or kidney stones is where the stone is lodged in different parts of the urinary system. Now here we have a few pictures of stones. They come in different shapes and sizes. Some comes in pebble form, some comes in smooth, some comes with spiculated ends and all that. Okay, they may be large, they may be small. Okay. Secondly, urinary stone contents are different. You can have calcium-based stones, either calcium oxalate, calcium phosphate, apatite stones, and Bushell stones, or you can have struvite stones, which are infective stones, uric acid stones, matrix stones, and other rare stones. Some of these stones are very hard to break, so the treatment will be different from the easier ones. Now, this is a very important aspect in stone formation. We need to know exactly where the stones are. Are they in the kidney, ureter, or the bladder? This diagram shows the urinary system from the kidney coming down the ureter, which is a tube, going to the bladder. Stones can form anywhere along this track. The commonest area where stones primarily form is actually in the kidney. All stones form in the kidney. Some stones may primarily form in the bladder when there is chronic urinary retention, when the urine is retained, it's in stasis, and crystal starts forming and aggregating to form the stone. So primarily stones form in the kidney, some cases in the bladder, but primary stones don't form in the ureter, they always come from the kidney. Now what about kidney stone management? Now to understand kidney stone management, we need to know the size of the stone, the situation of the stone, and what type of stone we are dealing with. There are three main modalities of treatment. The ESWL therapy, which is based on shockwave therapy, that you can see on the left side of the screen. The PCNL, which is based on puncturing the kidney directly and then breaking the stone and sucking out the stones. And finally, retrograde endourological procedures, or known as RIRS or URS, using scopes. Using these scopes, we go from below into the bladder and then right up to the kidney along the ureter. Okay, so we have three different modalities: ESWL therapy, PCNL, and retrograde endourological procedures, which are actually scope procedures. First, we come to ESWL therapy or extracorporeal shockwave lithotripsy. Many people call this as laser. Actually, this is not laser. Among the public, they say if you want a laser stone, actually what they mean is shockwave therapy. It's a non-invasive therapy. There's no instrument going into your body. It's based on shockwave from outside, focus into the stone, and the shockwave energy will start breaking and cracking the stones up. What you see here is the shockwave generator together with a table where the patient will lie down on. Now basically this is the diagrammatic representation of how we do ESWL therapy. The patient lies down on the table. The shock waves are delivered from the back of the patient. After having focused the stones with an X-ray beam, we need to localize the stones. It's very important. We cannot just place a patient on the table and then start blasting the kidney. It will not break the stones. The stones must be specifically focused on the stones must be specifically focused using the localizing modalities like X-ray beam or ultrasound. Now this basically shows how the shock wave breaks the stone. We have to focus the stones using either fluoroscopy or ultrasound, and then the energy is delivered into the stone to break the stone into many pieces. We do not remove the stones, we allow the stones to come out by natural passage. Basically, this how a lithotripper machine is. You see, we have got old generation machines where at one time in the 1980s and 1990s is a big swimming pool where the person has to be immersed in a swimming pool under general anesthesia, and then the shock waves are directed into the kidney. But nowadays with the newer generation lithotripters, this whole swimming pool is made into a small water cushion, and the water cushion is placed in the kidney area so that the shock wave can travel through this water cushion into the kidney to break the stones. The lithotripter consists of shock wave generator, which produces the shock waves, the table where the patient lies on, the C-arm, which is the X-ray machine, and an ultrasound to also focus the stones. We need to focus the stones to break the stones. Okay, this ESWL machine or ESWL lithotripter in our suite in our hospital. It's a big room, quite quiet, under aircon. The patient just lies down on this table, and then we'll focus the stones to blast it. This is a different angle, viewing the ESWL machine and the table. Now, these are the different components that we have to use to do ESWL for patients with kidney stones. There's an ultrasound to focus the stones, fluoroscopy to also focus the stones, a shock wave generator with water-filled cushion, and the patient lies on top of the table. We focus the stones and then start the shock wave generation. Usually the doctor or the nurse or the technician will be sitting at one end of the corner, looking at the ESWL display panel, where there's real-time focusing of the kidney and the stone. And while the stone is well focused, we will start the ESWL to break the stones. This is how it looks like on the surgeon's view at the other end of the corner of the room. We focus and then we start blasting the stones for almost an hour. Sometimes the kidney moves and the stone goes out of focus. We'll have to refocus the stones back into the same focus and then continue with the ESWL therapy. Advantage of ESWL therapy is it is non-invasive. You do not need to put any instruments to break the stone. Success rates would depend on many factors. We depend on the size, we depend on the weight of the person, whether the person is obese or underweight. Usually success rate with children are very good, the stone breakage rate. Normal adult, the stone fragmentation rate is maybe about 70 to 80%. But children are better off. Some adults who are very overweight may not give good success with ESWL therapy. Then we have other modalities of treatment to choose on for breaking the stones. The second modality we use is PCNL or percutaneous nephrolithotomy. Basically, it's directly puncturing the kidney, making a track into the kidney system, localizing the stone, breaking the stone, and sucking out or extracting the stone. Okay, this picture shows a simple interpretation of how PCNL is done. Direct puncture of the kidney and breaking the stones. The most important first step that we do is to puncture the kidney. We've localized the kidney stone using an image intensifier or an X-ray tube. Then with a needle, we puncture into the kidney system exactly to where the stone is. After puncturing into the kidney, we place a guide wire into the kidney system. The purpose of the guide wire is to make sure we got the correct system and also to use for dilatation of the track. Then we dilate the track and we put in the instrument to break the stones. So basically, after we insert the instrument, we start fragmenting the stones using an intracorporeal lithotripter, either based on pneumatic modality or ultrasonic modality, to break the stones and either suck out the stones or extract the stones using a forceps. After doing the PCNL, there will be a puncture wound going into the kidney. There will be some bloods or blood clots coming out, which is usually very well controlled. We place in a percutaneous nephrostomy tube or a tube from the kidney to the external outside and place it on the catheter bag. The purpose is to drain some blood if there's present, as well as to ensure that the kidney does not get obstructed or dilated, which can cause sepsis or infection. This tube is kept for another 2 or 3 days or so, following which then the tube will be removed. Now this is one of the patients who's placed in a prone position, that means the back facing upwards. Puncture has been done. This is a dilatation using a balloon. Dilate the puncture track until about 1 centimeters in diameter. Then through that track, we place in an instrument known as a nephroscope, and then we use another instrument to break the stone into many pieces. This is the end result. We break the stone into so many pieces. Sometimes we use an ultrasonic lithotripter and break into very, very small pieces. Or sometimes we use a pneumatic lithotripter, break into larger pieces, less than 1 centimeters. And then we can extract it along the nephrostomy track. Sometimes we need to do 2 punctures. If the stone is very large, something like a staghorn stone, sometimes 1 puncture is not adequate, as the stone may be in a different pole of the kidney. At times we need to do 3 punctures as well through the kidney. This all varies based on the stone size and how complicated or complex the stone are. After doing the operation, we just place in the tubes. Look at that. There's only 1 centimeter puncture marks to go and obtain the stone from the kidney. This is unlike many years ago in the 1980s and 90s, where we used to make a big incision, about 8 inches to 12 inches, make a big incision, open up the kidney to cut the kidney and remove the stone. Now it's only small punctures, we can remove big stones. This is the end result, the scar after PCNL. This is a very small scar, only 1 centimeter in diameter. Unlike a very large scar in the earlier operative era, where we used to make large incisions to remove kidney stones. The third modality of approach is retrograde endourological approach, or RIRS, or basically scope approach. We have many different scopes that can go up to the kidney from below. That means from below we go into the bladder and then we go in the kidney, use these instruments to break the stones and extract the stones out. This is basically a diagram showing how we extract the stones. The patient is under general anesthesia or spinal anesthesia. We place in a wire, do a contrast study, have a look at the kidney on the X-ray tube, and then go along with the scope right out of the kidney to break the stones and remove the stones. When we go up to the kidney, we use a laser to break the stones and then use an extracting device to remove the stones. Normally, most of the cases, it's not possible to immediately go up to the kidney because the ureter is very small compared to the scope. So sometimes we need to pre-stent the patient. That means we need to put in a stent to the patient, allow the ureter to get dilated, and after 2 weeks later, the patient comes back and gets admitted again. We remove the stent. With a dilated ureter, we place in the scope, go up, break the stones with the laser, and then start extracting the stones out. This is basically what we do in the RIRS procedure. Under anesthesia, we go inside, break the stones using laser, and then use extracting device like a tipless basket, remove as much stones as possible. It's not necessary or not always can we remove every single stone. There will be few left, but as long as the few left are very small stones or very tiny bits of sandy particles, it should be okay. The objective is to remove stones that can cause a nuisance later on. This is basically the procedure where we use the scope with the fluoroscopy X-ray setup and the different devices. For in urology, when we do stone operations, we need all different devices all at hand. Everything must be ready. We have got rigid scopes, we got flexible scopes, we got Domia basket, we got syringes, we got contrast. Everything should be ready for all urology procedures. Basically, we use X-ray images during this scope procedure to guide us while we are doing the scope and going up with the kidney. Now, this RIRS is a minimally invasive surgery. It does not require any incisions. There's no scar, there's no incision. We go through the natural urinary passage from the bladder right up to the kidney. Now, this fourth modality is an antegrade uroscopy. Same thing like the PCNL, the second modality that I mentioned. This is reserved for patients who have got a very dilated kidney or very swollen kidney where the stone is in the ureter. So we can still do same like a PCNL earlier. We puncture the kidney from above, put a wire and then go through down to remove the stones. But these are only for very dilated systems. We must have proper access during putting the scope inside. For all urological procedures, as far as endoscopy is concerned, in stone surgery, we need many different accessories. We need a proper scope, we need extraction baskets, we need a stone cone, we need many other different devices. Nowadays, we have got flexible scopes which are very good. They can give a 360 degrees secondary active deflection. In other words, the scope can move 360 degrees in a circle to look at every single calyx or every single portion of the kidney and see whether there are any stones hiding within it. This is another device known as stone cone. Usually when we break the stones in the ureter, they usually when the impact of the stones occurs, there's a retropulsion of the stone. That means the stone gets pushed back upwards. So by using the stone cone, we can prevent the stones being pushed upwards. So it's a very important device during our surgery. These are different graspers or extraction devices based on different types of stones and based on comfortability of the surgeon using which device. So we have different various devices from different various companies. This again, the many various stone extractors, some baskets, some tipless baskets, some helical stone extractors and so forth. Okay, this is a very important thing, ureteral stents. Stents are very, very important in urology. Whenever we do a scope into the ureter, there can be some amount of bruising or some amount of swelling of the ureter, and we need to stent these patients after operations to ensure that there's no block in the ureter due to some bruising or some clots or any infection that can occur after the operation. The stents are made of polyurethane, something like silicone but not silicone. Polyurethane is quite inert. It's about 24 to 26 centimeters in length. After the surgery, we put the stents all along from the kidney right down to the bladder. There are times when there's a completely impacted stone which we cannot access because of tightness of the ureter. Then we just put in the stents first. Let the urine passes through the stents and at least save the kidney. There are times when you have cancers which is blocking the ureter and causing kidney obstruction. Then is when the stents are also very useful. You place in the stents so that the urine can pass through along the urinary tract and actually save the kidneys. Ureteral stents are very, very important modality of treatment in most urological cases. The success depends on the type of stone, size of the stone and site of the stones. Very important. Although we have different modalities, ESWL, PCNL and RIRS, what we need to know is exactly where the stone is placed and what's the size of the stone. Then the different treatment changes. Treatment will be based on this. No one stone has the same treatment. In other words, you have a very large kidney stone. The treatment is different from a small kidney stone. The treatment is also different from a ureteric stone. Now this PCNL that I mentioned earlier, we do a puncture into the kidney. PCNL is suitable for very large stones, Staghorn stones. We puncture and break the stones and remove them. These are very large stones. Usually we reserve them for more than 2 centimeters or 2.5 centimeter stones. PCNL gives the best outcome among all the 3 different modalities of treatment. ESWL therapy, shockwave therapy, non-invasive therapy. We don't put any instruments in the body. But ESWL is suitable for smaller stones, stones less than 2 centimeters. Stones anywhere from 4 millimeters to 2 centimeters, you need to break it. You don't need to use an instrument, then you can choose ESWL therapy. Retrograde endothelial procedure or RIS or URS or scope procedure. They are suitable for ureteric stones or suitable for kidney stones where PCNL and shockwave therapy are unsuitable. For example, patient who are on anticoagulants, very heavy blood thinners. You cannot stop the blood thinners, if not the patient will get a heart attack or you'll get a rhythm abnormality or clot formation. So for that, we use an RIRS. Then we don't need to stop the anticoagulant for such a long time. As I mentioned, the success rate depends on the type of stone and size of the stone. And this will be an informed decision when the urologist discusses with the patient. They will inform all the different modalities and which are the best modalities of which type of stone. Now what about open stone surgery? This is something that we did in the 1980s and 1990s, where we do a big operative scar on the abdomen, then deep into the kidney and cut the kidneys to remove the stone out. This is almost obsolete now. We rarely ever do it. I have not done it for almost more than 1 decade because it's not necessary. All our scope procedures can easily do these operations and you don't need an open surgery. But there are some cases that you really need an open surgery if the stone is very, very large and a very complex stone. For the operation, we keep the patient under general anesthesia and the patient lies down on the side known as a lateral position, and a large 8 to 12 inches incision is made over the side of the abdomen. The kidney is transected and the stone is removed. This is exactly how an open surgery is, and look how much of blood comes out. It can be controlled, but we have to split the kidney and then we have to suture back the kidney or stitch back the kidney. So we have caused a big incision over the kidney. We rarely use this these days, but there are some cases, very rare cases, that we have to give an option of an open surgery to clear up all the stones. Now this is an example of a very large stone I removed some time back. A stone weighs almost about 1.2 kg. We needed an open operation for this. And that's a huge stone, something like a small rugby ball. Or a dinosaur egg, very huge one, in a villager who had it in the bladder. It was a bladder stone, but did not come to see a doctor for many years, was having a lot of urinary symptoms, pain and blood in the urine, finally decided to come down and get the bladder stone removed. Now before I go ahead, just to recapitulate, there is interventional procedures for kidney stones and ureteric stones. They might either be non-invasive, which is ESWL therapy, or invasive, which is using the RIRS or using the PCNL. But there is also non-interventional treatment of stones. Non-interventional treatment of stones are for small stones. That means we just observe the stone. Watchful expectancy. When the stones are very small, we can observe it. Every 3 months come in for an ultrasound, reassess the stone. If the stones gets bigger, then we blast the stones. That is treatment. So treatment can be interventional or non-interventional. Now what about cases where we have already cleared the stone? How do you prevent the stone? Now my following talk now from now onwards is about prevention of stones. How do you prevent the stones? Important to know why stone form. Then only you can prevent stones. Stone forms due to supersaturation of urine. So you need to dilute the urine. So the most important medicine or medication for stones is water. You need to dilute the urine, drink at least 2.5 to 3 liters water a day, as long as it's not contraindicated. In very elderly people or people with heart problems, you need to find out from your doctor whether it's safe enough to drink 2.5 liters of water or 3 liters water a day. If they are not suitable, then probably you just drink about 2 liters of water a day. If not, every other people should drink at least 2.5 to 3 liters water a day. Do not drink excessive water because it will cause dilution of the blood. The sodium level and the potassium level will fall down, and then a person can get fits and even can go into coma. Now, how do you know we are drinking adequate amount of water? Very easy. If you are thirsty, drink water. If you go to the gym or exercise, you sweat a lot, make sure you replenish the water loss with a lot of water. You have to measure and make sure you drink at least 2.5 to 3 liters water a day. Another way to know is when you pass urine, the color of the urine should not be dark. It should not be yellow in color. It should be clear colored urine or very mild yellow. Then you know urine is not concentrated. There's only one other way to prevent stones is to add in citrate or citrus fruits. That means eating citrus fruits like lime, lemon, orange juice, limon nipis is good. They have citrate, and citrate prevents aggregation of the stone, of crystals forming the stones. Now if you have uric acid or gout, then you need to reduce purine and uric acid containing food like seafoods, red meat, nuts and legumes. Beware of intermittent dehydration. That means you can drink a lot of water in the morning, but in the afternoon you don't drink water, at night you don't drink water, then you are in trouble. Because you can get dehydrated then. And when you get dehydrated, you form crystals aggregate and they form the stones. They form the matrix or beginning of the stones. So you have to be hydrated well throughout the day. We usually see this during the fasting month of the Ramadan month, where many people don't drink water during daytime. So my advice for those fasting during Ramadan month, make sure they drink lots of water in the night, and just before you start fasting, make sure you drink an adequate amount of water. Don't go out and exercise too much. Don't go out and lose a lot of sweat and get dehydrated in the daytime. Very important, there are no known medications that can break the stones. There are a lot of people going around taking prescriptions from what is known as Himalayan products, which are herbal products from India, known as Rovithinex and Cystones. Rovithinex and Cystone does not break stones. There is no modality of medication which can break stones at all. Nothing. Herbal medicine and traditional medicines are not proven to break stones. There's only one medication which can actually dilute stones, is only specifically for pure uric acid stones. Pure uric acid stones have got a pKa value of 6.0. In other words, if you alkalinize your urine to up to pH of 7.0, you'll be able to slowly dilute this stone. Only uric acid stones which are pure. But if you over-alkalinize your urine, the pH value comes to 7.5 or more, you'll start forming phosphate stones because of alkaline urine. If that's the case, then phosphate stones are very, very difficult to treat. We used to use this at one time, but the problem with this dilution of trying to dilute the stone is known as chemolysis. The problem with this, it takes a few weeks to a few months to dilute stones in the kidney. And it has to be pure uric acid stone. And secondly, once the stone's in the ureter, you already missed the boat. You cannot dilute the stones anymore. You have to have an intervention for ureteric stones. This probably near my last slide. What's the indications for emergency referral for patients with stones? Now they are very important red flags for immediate referral to the emergency department. First is infection with stones. You have infection with stones, the urinary passage is blocked, infection can spread very fast and destroy the kidney, and you can get into severe sepsis. Remember, an infected, obstructed stone is a urological emergency. You need to go straight and see a urologist if you are having fever with chills in the presence of stones. If the stones are on both sides, blocking both the kidneys, then it becomes an emergency also. Because by blocking both the kidneys, you can go into renal kidney failure. Also, stones in the presence of some amount of kidney impairment will cause the kidney impairment to become worse. So it needs an emergency referral. There are some people who have actually only one kidney. If they have one kidney and the stone is there blocking that kidney, also it becomes an emergency because it comes into kidney shutdown or kidney failure. The other group of people is in pregnancy. If you have a urethric stone in pregnancy, it's very important that you need to see the urologist because it can cause an obstruction, it can cause an infection and sepsis, and that infection can lead to premature labors as well. I think that's about all on understanding and managing kidney stones and urinary stones from me. I think there's quite a lot for the public to know about. It's an easy to understand issue. If you have stones, you have to see the urologist. We cannot have most of the people actually, when they see stones coming out, they think that they can just pass the stone out through the urine. That is wrong. You cannot just simply pass the stone out from the urine, because sometimes you can have many other stones in the ureter which can damage the kidney as well. So if you have urethric stones or kidney stones, you need to go on a follow-up with the urologist. I think that's about for my talk. For those who are interested, can go through my website at www.urology.com.my /kidney-urethric-n-bladder-and-stones. You can access that for more information on how we manage kidney stones, urethric stones, and bladder stones. And I thank you. Thank you.